Hello, hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to another slightly delayed edition of Arcana Unearthed this week. Normally we would do this stream on a Monday, but as the Force works in mysterious ways, and as it happens, Wizards of the Coast decided they were going to release some playtest material yesterday, which unfortunately I wasn't really able to do a stream yesterday, and I was hoping to do one later, maybe in the day. I wasn't kind of able to do it at the usual time. And as it happens, Wizards of the Coast put out the new playtest announcement video at the point in which we would have been halfway through the stream yesterday, so things worked out particularly well, so I thought I would hop on, wait until the playtest material was released so that we could go through it together. This new playtest material, they've confused things. This is playtest 8, even though the last one that they did with the bastions and things was technically playtest number 8. But they are calling that a bonus playtest packet. So this is officially playtest 8. And this particular playtest features some revisiting of some classes. They are looking at the Barbarian again, the Monk again, and the Druid again, with each one of those having a singular subclass in the playtest material. Some new and revised spells, as well as weapons revisions, some revised feats, and also some updates to the rules glossary, a little bit just to redefine some definitions of some of the things that come up as part of the main kind of core rules themselves, notwithstanding player options. So today, as it is the first time that a new playtest packet, I believe, has come out containing a new version of the Druid since I've been doing Arcana Unearthed. Obviously, there have been 2, I believe, prior versions to this. I thought it was apropos that we start this playtest packet looking at the Druid, which is what we will be looking at today. We'll look at the core class, and depending on how time goes, we'll go for about an hour-ish. Depending how time goes, we might have a look at the Circle of the Moon update as well, but the main focus here is just looking at the core Druid class as it appears in this new playtest material. Also, as this is the first time that I have covered the Druid class as part of this 2024 playtest, I am going to be comparing this to the Druid as it exists in the 2014 Player's Handbook, rather than comparing it to the previous playtest material. However, full disclosure, the first Druid that they released as part of the playtest, I did not like. I'm just going to put it out there. I know it was kind of a bit of a Marmite take on the class. Some people really loved it, some people didn't. I was not a fan. I respected what they were trying to do with the Druid class, and particularly with regard to wild shape. But I think... Look, at the end of the day, they are the ones with the data. But I do think, because their argument for it was that, well, a lot of people don't play the Druid because it's such a complex class to run, and they had concluded, and I don't think from the way they put it across, I don't think this was from the data. I think this was from simply the deductions that they had come to themselves. That they had concluded that was because there are so many beasts that a Druid can turn into that it was overwhelming for players, especially new players, which I can understand. It is a hard class for new players, but that was the main reason why it was one of the least played classes. I don't think that is the case. Yes, it is obviously one of the lesser played classes, but I don't think it is for the reasons that they had come to the conclusion to. But again, they have the data, so I'm happy to be wrong on that. But that doesn't match up, and this is kind of what I was going to say. This doesn't really match up with the anecdotal evidence that I have at my own tables. Because generally what I find is that Druid players will lean into certain beasts more than others. And they'll kind of have their go-to ones that they'll use, and then occasionally they'll branch out and try something else, which simplifies things a little bit. And I have the feeling, as we'll come to when we get to the wild shape, which I think is the most interesting bit of what they've done here, I think that is they've started looking at a little bit more anecdotal evidence as opposed to just pure data. Because actually I think what they've come up with is a very good solution to that problem that they believe that they have. But we'll come to that in a second. So let's have a look at the Druid class as it stands in this version of the playtest. The primary ability is remaining Wisdom, as has been the case with other playtest materials too. Primary abilities don't really seem to be changing much, so that's good news. And I don't think it would make any sense for it to change from Wisdom 2. There are a few new things in here, a fair few new things in here, actually, if we compare the two tables. I'll just quickly bring them up on screen for you there for you to see. A lot of new stuff. Again, I'm comparing this to the 2014 Player's Handbook version as opposed to previous playtest versions, but you can see there's a big shift in this class, which makes it quite interesting, I think. It's not all just based on what they call wild shape improvements in the 2014 Player's Handbook, so we'll see how that pans out. So let's take a gander then as we go through. So there's not much in the way of design updates, I think, because I've not followed the Druid too closely since the first playtest packet. But I think this version of the Druid is mostly in line with the previous version that they did. So if you are already been keeping up to date on the Druids, then I apologise. We're probably going to be going over a lot of stuff that you're already aware of. But if you haven't been paying close attention, then this you might find this interesting. So in terms of creating a Druid, hit dice do remain at 1d8 per Druid level. And you're going to get 8 plus your Constitution modifier with every level that you increase by. And in terms of proficiencies, saving throws, intelligence and wisdom, which remains the same. Skills, Arcana, Animal Handling, Insight, Medicine, Nature, Perception, Religion, Survival is probably going to remain the same. Yep, that looks about right. Proficiency in simple weapons, which is different. I think there are a few martial weapons in there as well in the 2014 Player's Handbook, but they've kept it nice and simple, no pun intended, with just simple weapons, which I guess for a Druid makes sense, but this might come up again in a moment. And then in terms of tools, the Herbalism Kit, which again I think makes complete sense. Armor training is light armor, no longer medium armor. They've taken medium armor away, which is very interesting indeed. But again, I think that will come up in a minute from what I skim-read earlier. And by the way, this is complete hot take. I've had a pretty quick skim before I went live today. So I've caught a few things, but most of it is first time reading. But also, they are still proficient in shields. So light armor and shields, no medium armor now. Starting equipment, they've changed the way they've been doing starting equipment anyway, so I won't go into too much detail on that. But basically, take this below or buy your own. It's basically what it is now. So now we get into Druid class features. Let's see. We start with Druidic. So as it reads in the 2014 Player's Handbook, you know Druidic, the secret language of Druids. You can speak the language and use it to leave hidden messages. You and others know this language automatically spots such a message. Others spot the message's presence with a DC 15 Wisdom Perception check, but can't decipher it without magic. This looks to be pretty much the same, although they have tweaked some things. You know Druidic, the secret language of Druids. While learning this ancient tongue, you also unlock the magic of speaking to animals. You always have Speak with Animals spell prepared. So that is new. So they've thrown that in as well. I actually think that's really cool. I think Speak with animals is one of those things that is so core to the druid anyway, that I like the fact that that is not core to the druid in terms of abilities, but when I think of the fantasy of the druid, I think that is spot on. And I think this was the problem that I had with the original playtest of the druid, is it felt to me like they had lost and misunderstood what the fantasy of the druid is. And it looks as though a lot of people called them up on that, and the feedback seems to be coming through in this playtest material quite strongly as to what that fantasy of the druid actually is, and why people want to play the druid. And this speak with animals automatically being prepared is one of those steps that I think is completely in the right direction, and is so core to the druid fantasy that is a welcome inclusion. And then, of course, the stuff about the hidden messages that exists in the 2014 Player's Handbook as well. Now we have a new thing, which is level 1 Primal Order. I say new, again, I'm comparing this to the 2014 Player's Handbook, not previous playtests directly, apart from the honourable mentions here and there. So this is a new thing for the 2024 Druid, which is Primal Order. You've dedicated yourself to one of the following sacred roles of your choice. The Magician, who I have a problem with the naming of that because it feels so undruid, but we'll probably won't get on that soapbox. Or the Warden. So the Magician, you know one extra cantrip from the Druid spell list. In addition, your mystical connection to nature gives you a bonus to your intelligence nature checks. The bonus equals your wisdom modifier with a minimum of +1. Now that's very cool. I like seeing things like this because one of the things I have an issue with this skill system in 5th edition is that it doesn't feel overly customizable. You're kind of proficient, or you're not, or you have expertise, or you don't. And I kind of miss a little bit. I come from the 3rd edition days, and I miss a little bit the crunch of just these extra little bonuses here and there. Which back then, we were playing it with, either Excel spreadsheets or pen and paper. Most people doing it on pen and paper. So those additional number crunches became a bit cumbersome at times. But actually now, most people are playing digitally. Most people have got it on their phone, or they've got it on a tablet or something. So actually that number crunching is not as easy to forget. So nice to see that they're including things like that. I like that. So also you do have that thing where, I've had it a few times, where the Druid is not as good at nature checks as some other classes, and that just feels a bit off to me. So again, a way of giving them a little bit of a boon and a little bit of edge on other classes is good. Or the Warden. Trained for battle, you gain martial weapon proficiency and armor training with medium armor. So that's why they have taken off those initial armor training and weapon proficiencies, just to give this other option. So are you going to lean into the magic side, or are you going to lean into the battle side? Which I think is... I like this kind of almost a subclass within the core class. Feels quite nice. I just don't like the phrasing, the choice of the word magician. It feels just so undruid to me. But hey, I can't tell you what I think would be a better word that hasn't already been used for something else in D&D. I just think surely there must be some term in folklore that might be more flavorfully appropriate than magician. But that's really picking at nits, because I think this is a good feature generally. Now we move on to spellcasting, which you also get at level 1. So you've learned to cast spells through studying the mystical forces of nature. See Player's Handbook for rules on spellcasting. So you know 2 cantrips of your choice from the Druid spell list. Rather than choosing, you may start with the Druidcraft and Produce Flame cantrip, so it's giving you some suggestions, which is nice. Whenever you gain a Druid level, you can replace one of your cantrips with another cantrip of your choice from the Druid spell list. I've already said and had people at me my opinion on that as a mechanic, but it's uniform across pretty much all spellcasting classes, so I won't get on that soapbox again. Just, it's not to my taste, but fine. When you reach levels 4 and 10 in this class, you can learn another cantrip of your choice from the Druid spell list, as shown in the cantrips column of the Druid table. In terms of spell slots, the Druid table shows how many spell slots you have to cast. So this all seems pretty much as normal in the 2014 Player's Handbook. I'm not going to teach you how to suck eggs in terms of how spellcasting works in 5th edition. If you're watching this video, I imagine you probably already do know this, so I won't go into too much detail, but from just having a quick skim here, I can't see any significant changes, and if any changes do exist, it's probably in the number of spell slots that you have. Changing your prepared spells. Whenever you finish a long rest, you can change your list of prepared spells. Yep. That looks about the same as well. Alright, cool. So we'll move on from spellcasting because I think that translates over. Now, level 2, Wild Companion. Now this is something that I think is new as well. Yes, no Wild Companion in the 2014 Player's Handbook. You could summon a nature spirit that assumes an animal form to aid you. As a magic action, you can expend a spell slot or a use of wild shape to cast the Find Familiar spell without material components. When you cast the spell in this way, the familiar is a fae, and it disappears when you finish a long rest. Huh. Now this I didn't quite see coming. I don't know. Again, this is a hot take. This is the first time I've read this class feature, so this is just immediate thoughts. So some people might disagree with me, and that's fine. And I might disagree with myself when I've had more time to process it. I just don't know how I feel. My feeling is I don't know how I feel about allowing a non-wizard to cast Find Familiar easier than a wizard can. Because a wizard is supposed to be, in my view, the most wizardy wizard, the most spellcasty. In the same way that the fighter is meant to be the person that is the best at fighting, the wizard is supposed to be the person who is the best at spellcasting. I don't know how I feel about allowing a druid to cast this spell easier than a wizard can. However, that being said, that could be a bit pernickety, and also they have kind of balanced that out a little bit with allowing, or rather forcing the familiar to be fey, and also it disappearing when you finish a long rest. So it's not permanent like a normal familiar would be. So as I'm thinking about it, maybe on balance that's not such a big deal. Yeah. I just don't know how I like spell components that have a cost, and Find Familiar has a cost. And sometimes spell components that have a cost can be an absolute pain in the backside. That being said, though, 8 gold's worth of charcoal or 10 gold's worth of charcoal, I can't quite remember how much it is, but that's fairly easy to get a hold of as the spell components go, because pretty much anywhere that somewhere's burning a fire, there's going to be charcoal. So maybe that's not as big of a problem as I had originally thought. So, yeah. I'm waffling now, so I shall move on. So, a design note on wild shape forms. The creature statistics section of the 2024 Player's Handbook will include more beast options than the 2014 book contains. Okay, so they're giving us a heads up. They're going to give more beast options. Fine. So now we get into what I think is the kind of interesting bit, which is what they've done with wild shape. Again, I'm comparing this mainly to the 2014 Player's Handbook, but also a little bit to that first playtest, because I didn't read through the second Druid that they released, so some of this might be familiar. I'm not sure. So, as a bonus action, you can transform into a beast form that you have learned for this feature. See known forms below. You stay in that form for a number of hours equal to half your druid level, or until you use wild shape again, have the incapacitated condition, or die. You can also leave the form early as a bonus action. I'm just going to dip into wild shape now, as it reads in the 2014 Player's Handbook to begin. Starting at 2nd level, you can use your action excuse me, to assume the shape of a beast that you have seen before. You can use this feature twice, and you gain expended uses when you finish a short or long rest. The druid level determines the beast you can transform into, as shown in the beast shapes table. So we're already tweaking things a little bit here. What they're doing is they're basically saying, rather than being able to transform into anything that fills these criteria, we're going to limit your options as a druid player to a limited number of beasts that you're able to transform into, which we'll come into the details of in a moment. But there's a number of hours equal to half your druid level rounded down. Sure, and that remains the same. Okay, so let's look at these known forms. You know a number of forms for this feature equal to 2 plus half of your druid level, and you round up. So you will start then with 3 forms to begin with, chosen from among the beast stat blocks in the player's handbook that have a maximum challenge rating of 1/4, which is the same, and that lack a fly speed. So you can choose something with a swimming speed, interestingly. Rather than choosing, you may start with the riding horse, spider, and wolf. So they give you some suggestions if you don't want to flick through, which I think is also a wise choice. They've gone for something that is utilitarian, something that is infiltration-y with the spider, and something that is perhaps useful for combat in the wolf. So some good choices there. Whenever you finish a long rest, you can replace one of your known forms with another eligible form. Now, I'm going to contradict something that I've gotten on my soapbox about for a very long time. I've gotten on my soapbox about giving characters the ability to change things and forget things with long rests, aside from wizards. Because, for example, with the fighter changing their weapon mastery after a long rest, whilst mechanically useful, I don't know how I feel about a fighter forgetting how to use a particular feature of a weapon. That just doesn't ring true for me from a narrative perspective. However, this I think works, and I think it works because it solves a very particular problem that is unique to the Druid, which they have talked about in their design discussions and their videos that they've put out very early on in the Druid, which is the Druid can be a very overwhelming class to play, particularly for new players, because there are so many options available. What they've done with this, with the known forms, is very clever. They've simplified the Druid by saying, just focus in on 3 animals. Here are the ones that we recommend you start with. And then between sessions, because not very often are you going to have more than maybe 1 or 2 long rests in a session. Quite often you'll have a long rest over several sessions, I've found. So between sessions, just go and have a flick through the player's handbook and think about what other beasts you might want to use. And then when you do a long rest, if you want to swap some out, swap some out. It just stops the overwhelm. And also, what it does is it doesn't nerf the current Druid, really. Well, it does, but it's a minor nerf. Because what you're saying is, we're not stopping the Druid from being able to transform into anything they want to transform into from the beast list. But what we are saying is that you're going to have to limit the options available to you on a daily basis. And I think that is the perfect middle ground for the Druid. I think it makes complete sense from a narrative perspective, in the same way that it does for a wizard, to prepare their spells. I like the idea of a Druid preparing their wild shape, and also Druids prepare spells anyway. So this is just kind of an extension, right? I think that's how you could easily justify this is an extension of them preparing their magic. I think it's great. Great way of designing this that really finds that nice sweet spot middle ground that they were seeking with that kind of rather generic template for the different types of animals, which, whilst utilitarian, in its design from a gameplay, from a mechanical perspective, kind of neutered the Druid from a narrative perspective. This feels so much nicer. So I'm going to give credit where credit is due. Props to the guys at Wizards of the Coast for this. I think this is so much more elegant. And again, this might be old information for some people because I didn't read the last playtest material for the Druid because I was so put off by the first one. But I'm glad I'm checking this one out because this feels really good. So when you gain certain Druid levels, the maximum challenge rating for your forms increases as shown in the Beast Shapes table. In addition, starting at level 8, you can adopt a form that has a fly speed, which is good news. When choosing a new form, you may look in the monster manual or elsewhere for eligible beasts if the DM permits you to do so. And I think probably most DMs will probably be like, yeah, sure. Because in my view, certainly in my table, you can be a beast. Whatever's available to you, so long as it's a beast, you can be it. For me, the limiting the list in the player's handbook is more for, again, not overwhelming players. So I imagine most DMs would probably fall down in that same sort of way on that. So, number of uses. You can use a wild shape twice. You gain 1 expended use when you finish a short rest, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. And you gain additional uses when you reach certain Druid levels, as shown in the wild shape column of the Druid table. So that tracks as well. While in a form, you retain your personality, memories, and ability to speak, and the following rules apply. Now, I'm just wondering, do you... I don't think you do maintain your ability to speak in the 2014 Player's Handbook. Huh. I'm trying to think now. How have we ruled that before? Yeah, you can't cast spells, and your ability to speak or take any action that requires hands is limited to the capabilities of your beast form. Yeah, so you can't speak currently, but they are keeping your ability to speak whilst you're transformed in the 2014 Player's Handbook. Okay. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I mean, it's not game-breaking by any stretch, but it presents a particular challenge to players when they have to transform to speak. But is that just being pernickety for me? Probably. I think that's fine. I think that's fine. I don't think it was necessary to change it, but I can see why they might have done. So, your game statistics are replaced by the statistics of your beast, but you retain your hit points, hit dice, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma scores, class features, languages, and feats. This is a big deal. You also retain your skill and saving throw proficiencies and use your proficiency bonus for them, in addition to gaining those of the creature. If the creature has the same proficiency as you and the bonus in its stat block is higher than yours, you use the creature's bonus instead of yours. If the creature has any legendary or lair actions, you can't use them. And then temporary hit points. When you assume a wild shape form, you gain a number of temporary hit points equal to your druid level. This is a big change. How the druid works in the 2014 Player's Handbook, if you don't know, is that when you turn into a beast, you basically swap your hit points out for them, essentially. So you gain temporary hit points essentially equal to the creature, because once you are killed as that monster, you revert. So you're able to kind of generate these stacks of hit points. This is a welcome change for me. I think the way the Wild Shapers worked in the past has actually been incredibly OP. It makes a druid a great class for a player to use if you're doing like solo, just one DM and one player. The druid's very, very useful for that because they're able to take a lot more hits because of it. But I mean, in reality, that breaks a lot of stuff. So actually, I think this is a welcome change. The Druid players are probably not going to be a fan because this is a big, massive, massive nerf to the Druid. Like, it's huge. But I think a necessary one because the Druid hit point pool was touch broken, maybe, in the 2014 Player's Handbook. Perhaps. I'm sure there'll be people that will tell me how ridiculous of a notion to say that it was broken is. I'm sure there will be. But I mean, it was a lot. It was a lot. Just so I make sure that I am correct on this. When you transform, you assume the beast's hit points and hit dice. When you revert to your normal form, you return to the number of hit points you had before you transformed. However, if you revert as a result of dropping to 0 hit points, any excess damage carries over to your normal form. For example, if you take 10 damage in animal form and only have 1 hit point left, you revert and take 9 damage. So what they're saying is, in the 2014 Player's Handbook, I have got that right, you transform, you swap your hit points for the beast, and then basically that becomes a temporary hit point pool, which they've completely changed here, which is completely right. So that's good. No spellcasting. You can't cast spells, but transforming doesn't break your concentration on a spell you've already cast, or prevent you from taking actions that are part of a spell, such as the Cool Lightning spell that you've already cast, or perhaps like Flaming Sphere or something like that, or Spiritual Weapon. Your ability to handle objects is defined by the form's limbs rather than your own. In addition, you choose whether your equipment falls to the ground, in your space, merges into your new form, or is worn by it. Worn equipment functions as normal, but the DM decides whether it is practical for the new form to wear a piece of equipment based on the creature's size and shape. Your equipment doesn't change size or shape to match the new form, and any equipment that the new form can't wear must either fall to the ground or merge with it. Equipment that merges with the form has no effect until you leave that form. And that tracks pretty much with how the Druid currently works as well. So then, at level 3 is where you choose your Druid subclass of choice, or Druid Circle as it was called in 2014. I kind of find it sad that they've replaced these different types of subclass with just the word subclass. I mean, it's kind of become part of the vernacular, I suppose, when we talk about D&D, of like which subclass have you gone with, but I always like a little bit of flavour in the way that they describe these things, but again, they're going for uniform, so I understand that. So the subclasses of your choice: Circle of the Land, Circle of the Moon, Circle of the Sea, or Circle of the Stars. And the Circle of the Moon is detailed below, which we probably won't get to today because there's a lot to cover in this Druid. At level 4 you get an ability score improvement or a feat of your choice if you qualify for it. And then at level 5 you get Wild Resurgence, which I think is technically new. Yes, it is. So at level 5, Wild Resurgence. If you have no uses of Wild Shape left, you can give yourself one by expending a spell slot, no action required. You can do so only once per turn. In addition, you can expend one use of Wild Shape to give yourself a level 1 spell slot, and you can't do so again until you finish a long rest. I think that's pretty cool. I think that's very cool, in fact. A lot of my opinion, I think, going forward of what they've done with this class is going to very much be tainted by the fact that they've pretty much nerfed the Druid to hell with the way that they've changed how the hit points work for the Wild Shape. I think I'm going to give them a lot of leeway here, but actually this doesn't feel at all unbalanced. I think it's perfectly fine. You trade a Wild Shape for a spell slot and vice versa. Makes perfect sense. Level 7, Elemental Fury, and again, this is a new one. In fact, most of these class features are new ones, because what they're doing is kind of swapping out the Wild Shape improvements for other kind of general, more general core things. So the actual level progression is less about the Wild Shape, and I have a feeling that that's where the Circle of the Moon subclass comes in. Is that then becomes about improving the Wild Shape aspect of things. So Elemental Fury. The might of the elements flows through you. You gain one of the following options of your choice. And this is no doubt going to be linked to whether or not you chose the Magician or the Warden at the beginning of your adventuring journey. So Potent Spellcasting, you can add your Wisdom modifier to the damage you deal with any Druid cantrip. Very nice. And Primal Strike. Once on each of your turns, when you hit a creature with an attack roll using a weapon or a beast form's attack in Wild Shape, you can cause the target to take an extra 1d8 cold, fire, lightning, or thunder damage. And you get to choose that every time you hit, which is very, very cool. I like that. It seems to me, just from reading through this, that they're trying to separate the core of the Druid out from Wild Shape. And they are very much, it's kind of that you're either a Wild Shape spellcasty Druid or you are a more melee sort of Druid, which really harkens back to the 4th edition days, because rather than having... 4th edition had loads of classes, and one of those was the Warden class, which was basically a fighting Druid, like a combat-based fighting Druid, as opposed to a utilitarian Druid, which was a separate class entirely. So they're kind of reintroducing that Warden aspect to the Druid, which I think makes a lot of sense, given that the game features much more on loads of different types of subclass as opposed to loads of different just general classes. So nice to see the Warden making a comeback, because that was a pretty cool class in 4th edition, I gotta say. Level 9, Commune with Nature. This, I presume, is a new one as well? Yes, it is. Commune with Nature. You are an expression of nature itself and commune with the natural world all around you. You always have the Commune with Nature spell prepared. Now, I must admit, I am not overly familiar with the Commune with Nature spell, so let me take a look here. Commune with Nature. I'm not so familiar. I'm familiar with Commune as a general spell. You briefly become one with nature and gain knowledge of the surrounding territory. In the outdoors, the spell gives you knowledge of the land within 3 miles of you. In caves and other natural underground settings, the radius is limited to 300 feet. The spell doesn't function where nature has been replaced by construction, such as dungeons and towns. You instantly gain knowledge of up to 3 facts of your choice about the following subjects as they relate to the area: terrain and bodies of water, prevalent plants, minerals, animals, or peoples, powerful celestials, fae, fiends, elementals, or undead, influence from other planes of existence, and buildings. This is actually very cool. I did not know, I was not familiar with this spell at all. For example, you can determine the location of powerful undead in the area, the location of major sources of safe drinking water, and the location of any nearby towns. This is a super cool spell. If you like the exploration pillar of the game, particularly wilderness travel, which anybody that knows the way I run my games, I'm a huge fan of wilderness exploration, so this is a very cool spell, and nice to see that that's been built into the Druid as part of its core class for the 2024 Player's Handbook. Big win. Huge fan of anything that encourages more wilderness travel in the game, so big fan of that personally, to my personal taste. Improved Elemental Fury. The option you chose for Elemental Fury grows more powerful. This is at level 15, so this is a whole 8 levels after Elemental Fury. So on this list it feels quite close, but it's actually quite far away in game. So when you cast a Druid cantrip with a range of 10 feet or greater, the spell's range increases by 300 feet. Wow. That's a lot. That's a big increase. Very cool. So, I mean, really, increasing it by 300 feet basically turns that spellcasting in that cantrip into basically, yeah, I can probably hit them from where I am. Because it's very rare that I find that you're in combats with distances greater than even a couple of 100 feet. Doable, but rare. Primal Strike. The extra damage of your Primal Strike increases to 2d8. Okay, so really with the Elemental Fury, the potent spellcasting for the first one is kind of the weaker of the two, and then I would say the Primal Strike is probably the stronger. And then they swap it round for improved Elemental Fury. Not that the Primal Strike is no good for the level 15 one, but I would say the potent spellcasting is more useful. Then at level 18, Beast Spells. While using Wild Shape, you can cast spells in beast form, except for any spell that has a material component with a cost specified, or that consumes its material component. Very cool. I think that's probably included in some of the wild shape improvements that are in there. Let me see. Oh yeah, beast spells. That's right. Level 18, you can cast many of your druid spells in any shape you assume. You can perform somatic and verbal components of a druid spell whilst in a beast shape, but you aren't able to provide material components. So it's essentially the same. And then Archdruid. This is the final class feature for the core druid. I think I might. Well, we might have a look at the Druid subclass here for Circle of the Moon, actually. Let's see. So, Archdruid. The vitality of nature constantly blooms within you, granting you the following benefits. Evergreen wild shape. When you roll initiative and have no use of wild shape left, you regain 1 expended use of it, which I'm pretty sure is the same here. Oh. No. That's not true, actually. Oh, no, actually. Okay, it's been worded different. So it was unlimited wild shapes before, but now you gain 1 basically during the beginning of combat, which I think is better. It's nerfed, obviously, but I think it stops it from. I mean, it's level 20, and also they've nerfed wild shape anyway, so I'll probably give them a bit of leeway on that. They probably could have afforded the unlimited one, but they're trying to bring the druid back into balance, I think, and I think that's fair. A nature magician. You can convert uses of wild shape into a spell slot, no action required. Choose a number of unexpended uses of wild shape and convert them into a single spell slot, with each use contributing 2 spell levels. You must then finish a long rest before you can do so again. For example, if you convert 2 uses of wild shape, you produce a level 4 spell slot. So what's the maximum that you could produce? So wild shape uses of 4, so you could produce an 8th level spell slot. That's pretty cool. So 9th level spell slots are going to be out of reach for you on that, but still, a level 8 to be able to do that is pretty damn cool. But of course, then you'd have no wild shapes left. Then longevity. The primal magic that you wield causes you to age more slowly. For every 10 years that pass, your body ages only 1 year. Now that's all well and good and cool and everything, but do you know what? I miss aging in D&D. I actually think it's a really cool aspect of D&D from older versions of the game. I'd like to see aging make a bit more of a comeback, and aging effects. I have it actually in. I have a copy here of the first edition. It's a reprint, obviously. The first edition. Dungeon Master's Guide, and it's got rules in here for how aging affects you, and if you're older, like if you're elderly, you gain wisdom but lose strength and things like that. I'd like to see that make a return, so that as you age, and depending on which races you choose, of course, as you age, your stats change. So then aging becomes something you might either want to avoid or want to lean into, perhaps. I mean, it's a cool class feature that you age slower, but actually, from a gameplay perspective, unless they're going to add anything new in, which I'm hoping they will, but from a mechanical perspective, it doesn't seem to make any difference at all. Alright, can I go for 15 minutes and cover this? Do I do it really, really quickly? Or do I give it the love and attention that it deserves? You know what? I'm gonna hold fire on this, I think, and we will cover that. The Circle of the Moon Druid. Actually, no. Do you know what? I'm gonna go for it. Circle of the Moon. So this has traditionally in the 2014 Player's Handbook been the druid that is the best at wild shaping. They are the more combat-based druid, where the wild shape is souped up so that they can get in your face as a brown bear. So, some updates. Circle spells is a new feature that provides spells that you always have prepared and can cast in wild shape form. Very cool. Circle Forms, formerly Combat Wild Shape, has been streamlined to determine your AC and the number of temporary hit points gained. Improved Circle Forms lets you add your Wisdom modifier to your Constitution saving throws whilst in Wild Shape. And Lunar Form now also lets each of your Wild Shape attacks deal extra radiant damage, which is very cool. So let's have a look at circle spells then. Your connection to this circle ensures that you always have certain spells ready. When you reach a Druid level specified in the Circle of Moon spells table, you thereafter always have the listed spells prepared. In addition, you can cast the spells from this feature whilst you are in wild shape form. So that's also very cool, because obviously you can't do so normally. So you'll be able to cast Cure Wounds, Moonbeam, and Starry Wisp, which is a new spell that we'll look at in another episode of this. Then at level 5 you gain Vampiric Touch, and 7 Fount of Moonlight, also a new spell, and then at level 9 Dawn. So these are spells that you'll be able to cast as a beast, which again, the whole point of the Circle of the Moon Druid is, of course, or certainly has been, making your wild shape as useful as possible, which is nice. So, fan of those Circle of the Moon spells. I wonder then if, and again, I've not been keeping up on the Druids, to be fair, but I wonder then if the other circles are going to be having these always prepared, able to cast in wild shape spells, or maybe that's just a Circle of the Moon thing. Level 3, Circle Forms. You have learned ancient techniques that allow you to channel lunar magic when you assume a wild shape form, granting you the following benefits. The maximum challenge rating for the form equals your Druid level divided by 3, rounded down. Okay. Oh, okay, so you're starting at level 1, and that's actually pretty neat. That is pretty neat. Your AC equals 13 plus your Wisdom modifier until you leave the form. Now remind me, what would the AC normally be with these new versions of the rules? Where's Wild Shape gone? Oh, there it is. Game stats. So your AC would change to the beast normally, from what I'm reading here. So actually it's going to change to an AC that's based off of your own stats, which is good. So again, getting this wild shape up close in the thick of the fight, because you're probably, if Wisdom's going to be your highest feature, you're probably going to be on a +2 fairly early on. So your AC is going to be about 15 when you're in wild shape form. So that's a good starting place for level 3, certainly. Temporary hit points. You gain a number of temporary hit points equal to 3 times your Druid level. And again, this would normally be equal to your Druid level. So you're getting more temporary hit points by being Circle of the Moon. And again, because of the way they've changed how the hit points work with the beasts, I think this is a very welcome addition. It's obviously nerfed compared to where it was in the 2014 Player's Handbook, but I think this is a nice touch. More balanced, and yeah, as far as if I'm thinking about whether or not I want to be Circle of the Moon, that's certainly something to tempt me with. Improved Circle Forms. While in a wild shape form, you gain the following benefits. Each of your attacks in a wild shape form can deal its normal damage type or radiant damage, so you can start applying radiant damage, particularly useful if you're going to be fighting undead and things. I mean, the radiant damage thing is probably not that big of a deal in most cases, but still a useful thing to have. Although level 6, you're starting to have things that are resistant to non-magical attacks, like non-magical bludgeoning, piercing, slashing, for example. So your Lunar Radiance, I suppose, though the radiant damage itself isn't significant in those cases a lot of the time, Where it does become significant is that you're not dealing bludgeoning, slashing, or piercing damage. You're dealing a different type of damage, which is going to then at least bypass that resistance, which can be very helpful. Increased toughness. You can add your wisdom modifier to your constitution saving throws. Very nice. That's very nice. And that's at level 6. Then at level 10, Moonlight Step, which I'm trying to think now in terms of the Circle of the Moon Druid. Do we have something like that? No, we don't. So Moonlight Step. You magically transport yourself, reappearing amid a burst of moonlight. As a bonus action, you teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space you see, and have advantage on the next attack roll you make before the end of this turn. You can use this feature a number of times equal to your wisdom modifier, minimum of once, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. You can also regain uses by expending a spell slot of level 2 or higher for each use you want to restore. No action required. So I like this. So it's basically Misty Step, but it's using moonlight, and it's also a more powerful version of Misty Step because it's a level 10 feature, so you're going to get advantage on the next attack roll that you make, which I guess is because of the flash of the burst of moonlight. I guess is probably what they're thinking, is just going to startle whoever you're next to. I think is probably the logic that they're doing, which is how I would probably rule it from a flavor perspective. So I think very, very nice. A nice little touch. And again, this Circle of the Moon Druid, what I'm really liking is the flavor feels on par with somebody. Like, it's moonlight everywhere. And I'm really liking the flavor of this. The Circle of the Moon Druid, as it exists in the 2014 Player's Handbook, is kind of feels a little bit more kind of like Druid werewolf kind of hybrid thing. Whereas this feels much more like you are powered by the moon, which visually, just the visuals that I'm seeing in my head is just much cooler. So I'm very much liking this. And talking of which, level 14, Lunar Form. The power of the moon suffuses you, granting the following benefits. Improved Lunar Radiance. Each of your attacks in a wild-shaped form deals an extra 1d10 radiant damage on a hit, which again is very nice. And whenever you use the Moonlight Step, you can also teleport one willing creature. The creature must be within 10 feet of you, and you teleport it to an unoccupied space you can see within 10 feet of your destination space. And that is the final feature for the Circle of the Moon Druid, which... I mean, I've got to say, right, I'm going to give final thoughts here as I wrap up. I've got to give props to Wizards of the Coast now. When the new Druid class came out for the playtest materials, I really hated it. I really despised it. I felt like it just sucked the soul out of the Druid, made the Druid feel... like an inconvenience to Wizards of the Coast, if I'm honest, and it made it feel as though a lot of toys were being taken away with the Druid, all in the name of easier game design and more simplified game design. And look, 5th edition is a great system for being nice and streamlined, nice and simplified. When you compare it to things like 3rd edition or Pathfinder, which can be very, very crunchy, they've done a very good job of making things nice and refined and nice and simplified, which is great. But also that can be 5th edition's biggest weakness sometimes. I think the Druid class that they released with the for the 2024 the first playtest lent a little bit too much in that direction of just, it was simplicity for simplicity's sake, you know, and I don't think it actually solved the problem that they were trying to solve. It was kind of like trying to take a sledgehammer to kill an ant. You know, it was elegant mechanics design, but it didn't feel like elegant game design to solve that particular problem, if that makes sense. What I like with what they've done here is they've actually looked at the problem again and gone, actually, how can we solve that problem without completely overhauling the class? Because that's what they did before. They completely overhauled the way that the class worked and everything. And I hated it. Because for me, the fantasy of being a druid is being able to transform into all of these various different animals. And part of the fantasy of being able to transform into all of these various different animals is you think of these various different animals and what the powers of nature grants these different types of animals. So it might be, well, I'm going to turn into a bear because I just want to be like a hulking beast. I want to be a leopard because I want to be really fast. I want to be an owl because I want to be able to scout around in the air at night. I want to be a spider so I can crawl into small places and maybe capture things in my web, for example. I don't know. I want to be a giant frog or a giant toad because I want to be able to swallow something because that'd be really helpful for this particular situation. I want to be a snake because I want the venom, etc, etc, etc. The problem with the one last time was they basically went, yeah, all of those things are cool, so what we're going to do is we're going to give you something really, really bland and basically say, you fill in the gaps. You fill in the gaps, and we're not going to tell you that you're a toad now. We're going to tell you that you are you're just a beast, and you do the rest to make it as toad-like as you can, using your imagination. And I've said before, I'm not a huge fan of the game design wherein, for a role-playing game anyway, I'm not a huge fan of the game design decision to, well, you just kind of, you make it work narratively. I'm not a fan of that. This has kind of reversed that position that they took with the Druid before, and really kind of gone, right, how can we take what we already had with the 2014 Druid, simplify it down so it's not overwhelming for players, tweak a few things that were perhaps a little bit broken, maybe a little bit on the 2014 Druid, simplify it down so it's not overwhelming for new players, and it's equally not overwhelming for established players as well, because there is a lot of choice with the Druid, and that can be a challenge. But actually that huge degree of choice is also what makes the Druid appealing in the first place. It's like taking a wizard and saying, well, rather than having all of these loads of spells that you could have, which there's a lot of choices, we're going to make you only pick from this list of 3 every level. And then just kind of basically we're going to give you an elemental blast spell, and then basically you choose the element, and that's the only cantrip you're going to have. Like, if that was the proposal for the wizard, people would go, nah, thanks. And I don't think Wizards of the Coast would propose that anyway, because that would just be ridiculous. But that's kind of what they tried to do with the Druid. But with this, they've now said, well, no, actually, we want to maintain that fantasy of choice, but we want to do it in such a way that is restrictive enough to make it simple, but not so restrictive that it feels as though we're taking your toys away. And I think they've found the perfect balance with this idea of you pick 3 creatures or however many creatures that day, and those are the ones that you turn into that day. And then tomorrow you can pick whichever other beasts you want. But for now, just focus on those 3. And I think that's a nice touch. I like what they've done in terms of the tweaks to the wild shape, because the hit point pools was a little bit ridiculous. You know, when I have had druids in a party, I'm like, well, I now have to throw everything I can at just trying to reduce the druid's hit point pools, and then I've got to have enough encounters this day to actually get them to use all of their wild shapes, eliminate all of their wild shapes by getting rid of the hit point pools, etc, etc. It just made the druid a little bit unwieldy for the DM to have in a party, in terms of the adventuring day, etc, etc. So though the druid players are probably going to be grossly unhappy at the degree to which wild shape has been nerfed, I think it was the right decision and absolutely the right step in the right direction. And the Circle of the Moon Druid, wow, wow, wee wow. Look, not overly powerful. Not overly powerful. Again, the Druid as a class is just been nerfed. but for all of the right reasons and in all of the best ways. But the Circle of the Moon Druid really brings it up a few steps again, so it doesn't feel as nerfed. And also, I love the flavour of it. I love the choices that they've made from a flavour perspective. Both with the Druid overall, I think this idea of the Warden versus the Magician, I wish they'd come up with a different term. The Warden or the subclass within the overall class, and then you have a subclass as well. I do kind of like that. I'm just really, to go from having hated the Druid class that they proposed a few months ago, to the extent that I was like, I actually really don't know if I want to start playing this new updated version of 5th edition. Like, it really put me off. To go from that to, like, I actually really love this new version of the Druid. Like, love it. I think this might be, I'm going to put it out there. This might be my favourite new class tweaking that they've done. I'm going to put it out there. I think it might be at top of my list. Because it feels like it's got so much more flavour and character than just being a shape-shifting nature cleric. They've given it much more. And I think that's what it needed. I think, going back to my earlier point, I think they've looked at the feedback, they've thought about it again. I think they'd come to the wrong conclusions previously when they were putting the first playtest Druid together. They'd come completely to the wrong conclusions, not using anecdotal, focusing too much on the data, not looking at anecdotal evidence enough, and probably their own experiences as well. Because you can rely on data too much. And I think that's the mistake they had made. But now they've really reassessed it. I think I was saying in private conversations, the conclusions they'd come to with why people weren't playing Druids before was wrong. This feels as though they've come to the right conclusions this time, and they've adjusted the class appropriately. So I'm a big fan of this new Druid. I'm going to be telling everybody to check it out. And likewise, many of you people may disagree with me. I hope that some of the stuff that I'm saying rings true for you, but everybody's entitled to their opinion. So do let me know what you think of the new updated Druid in the comments below. Don't forget as well, if you have made it this far, to make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Hit that subscribe button, because then you won't miss any other videos. We've got our actual play as well if you're new to the channel, which is basically the main function of this channel, is that actual play with our campaign there. We're very busy with content at the moment, so more stuff coming out soon. And of course, if you have found this particular video useful, do give it a like, a thumbs up, and maybe we can see if we can hit that 30 like threshold, which I'm still eager to hit within the next few days. That'd be swell. But for now, that is it from me this week, and we will take a look at the rest of this playtest packet in the coming weeks. Oh, and by the way, the survey isn't yet open. The survey opens, I think, was it on the 11th of December that they've said that it's going to open up? Let me just quickly check the page. Yes, the 11th of December is when the survey opens. So you can't give any feedback yet, but there is a link to the overall document in the episode description below. So if you did want to check out the other stuff without waiting for me to go through it, then you're of course welcome to do so via that link. Follow that, and that will take you to the document. But feedback opens on the 11th of December for the playtest material, and will probably be open for a couple of weeks. But so far from me, big thumbs up for the updated Druid, and we'll see what else they have waiting for us in the rest of that playtest material in the next few episodes that we do. So thank you very much for those that have joined me live. Thank you very much for those of you who are tuning in via the time-travelling powers of the internet. And I will catch you next week, probably returning back to our usual time of Monday at 12:30 p.m. UK time. But that's it from me for now, and I will catch you next time.